I found the envelope just past dawn, half tucked under my door like it was afraid to be caught. No return address, no name, just one line, scrawled in block letters. Check who's using your bank account. I laughed, softly, stupidly, because who else could it be? I lived alone, paid my own bills, balanced my checkbook like religion. But that night, sitting at my kitchen table with shaking hands and a highlighter, I realized the truth. Someone I loved had been stealing from me in silence, and they weren't done yet. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Dorothy Harris didn't notice the envelope at first. It had slid halfway under her front door, white, unmarked, just peeking past the beige welcome mat she vacuumed every Friday. It was the faint scraping sound that caught her attention, something dry against the laminate flooring. When she bent down, her knees popped louder than she expected. Old hinges, she muttered to herself. She pulled the envelope out with the same wariness she used to correct essays in her teaching days. Careful, deliberate, no assumption, no return address, no stamp, just her name, Dot, written in tight, neat block letters. Not Dorothy, not Mrs. Harris, just Dot. Only one person in the building ever called her that with any kind of affection. She cracked the flap open and unfolded the single piece of lined paper. Dot. You need to check who's been using your bank account. It's not a mistake. Look closely. F. Frank Lewis, her neighbor across the hall, former mail carrier, walked with a shuffle and knew everyone's business, though never in a nosy way. It was his job once, he said, to notice patterns. Mail not picked up, newspaper stacking, names that didn't match the mailbox. Habit. Dorothy read the note again, then again. Her hands were still, but her heart had begun to knock around in her chest like a loose dryer belt. She hadn't shared her bank details with anyone, not since Harold died. Even Kyle, for all his charm and breezy familiarity, didn't have access. Not directly. Still gripping the paper, Dorothy walked slowly to the dining room, where her blue checkbook sat tucked between two Reader's Digest magazines on the sideboard. She pulled it out, sat at the table, and flipped through the carbon copies. The last check she remembered writing was to the water company, $74.18. The next one was for $250, written out to cash. She stared at it. She hadn't written that check. Reaching for her laptop with a calm she didn't feel, Dorothy logged into her bank account. The website had recently changed its layout. Too many colors, too many icons. But she managed to navigate to her checking history. Her breath caught. 4 withdrawals in the last 2 weeks. 2 from ATMs she didn't use. 1 PayPal transaction she didn't recognize. 1 check written out to someone named L. Hartley, totaling nearly $1,900. Her mouse hovered over the contact number at the top of the. She clicked it. A recorded voice offered options. Dorothy pressed 3 for fraud, then 2 for current accounts, then waited, her fingers clenched in her lap. The note from Frank still beside her keyboard like a weight. Fraud Department, this is Officer Tim Carter speaking. How can I help you today? Dorothy cleared her throat. Yes, hello. My name is Dorothy Harris. I believe someone may have accessed my checking account without permission. Carter's voice was calm but focused. I'm going to ask you a few questions. Can you confirm the last transaction you personally authorized? She answered, listing dates, amounts. He asked her to verify her contact info, then gave her a reference. I'll open an investigation immediately, he said. We'll review transaction logs and security footage if any of the withdrawals were done in person. You may get a call from a fraud analyst in the next 48 hours. In the meantime, don't share this information with anyone and no more. I won't, Dorothy said quietly. Believe me. When she ended the call, she sat in silence for several minutes, the ticking of the kitchen clock suddenly loud. Afternoon sun cast a rectangle of light across the carpet, catching dust in midair. She turned the paper over in her hand again. Frank hadn't signed it fully. No explanation. Just that one hard line. It's not a mistake. She picked up her notebook, the one she used to jot grocery lists, neighbors' birthdays, recipes clipped from the Star Tribune, and tore out a clean page. At the top, she wrote in crisp cursive, suspicious activity, September 9th. She underlined it. Outside, in the hallway, she thought she heard a door creak shut. Dorothy's eyes didn't leave the notebook. Her voice, when it came, was low and steady. Whoever it is, she whispered, her pencil pressing into the page like a blade. I'll find out. The bank smelled like lemon polish and cold air. Dorothy Harris stepped inside with her coat folded neatly over one arm, her pocketbook clutched tight in the other. The marble counters gleamed under recessed lights, and the soft sound of a printer whirred somewhere behind the glass cubicle. A young woman greeted her from the reception desk with a clipped, polite smile, but Dorothy barely registered. She wasn't here to chit-chat. A tall man in a gray blazer emerged from one of the back offices. "Mrs. Harris?" he said, stepping forward. Dorothy gave a short nod. "Officer Carter." He gestured gently toward the side corridor. "Let's talk in here." The private conference room had no window, just a round table, 2 chairs, and a wall-mounted monitor humming softly in sleep mode. Carter keyed in his credentials and brought up the bank's internal dashboard. Dorothy sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. "I want to walk you through what we found," he said. "There were 2 ATM withdrawals that flagged our system based on unusual location, and the second one was recorded at 8:12 p.m. 2 nights ago. We were able to pull footage." The monitor flickered, and a grainy black and white still appeared. The back view of a man at an ATM. "Now, I know this is difficult, but I need to ask. Do you recognize the person in this image?" He clicked again, zoomed in. Dorothy leaned forward slowly. Her heart didn't pound. It dropped. Even blurred. The slope of the shoulders, the curl of the hair, the watch on the left wrist. It was unmistakable. Kyle, her son. Her mouth opened, but no words. Carter's voice softened. "We'll continue the investigation formally. If you choose to file charges, this will be key evidence, but I wanted you to see it first." Dorothy sat back, her hands trembling lightly. "He didn't even bother to disguise himself." "No," Carter said. "He didn't." The silence hung there, stale and sharp. She left the bank without remembering how she got to her car. Frank was sitting on the front bench when she returned, a to-go cup in hand, staring across the parking lot like he was watching storm clouds gather. He stood when she approached. "You saw it." Dorothy didn't answer right away. She just nodded and unlocked her front door. Frank followed to the threshold but didn't enter. "You can't unsee it, Doc," he said gently, "but you can use it." She didn't reply, but her eyes met his, clear and shining with something that wasn't quite tears. "Thanks for the note," she said softly, then closed the door between them. Inside, she hung her coat, slipped off her shoes, and went straight to the table. Her notebook was still open to the page from. She picked up her pen and added a line beneath the date. Surveillance photo. Kyle, 8:12 p.m. Sep to 7. ATM withdrawal. Unmasked. Then another. Tim Carter confirmed identity. Filing pending. She didn't allow herself to cry. Not yet. Instead, she drew a small box beside the entry and checked it off. Her handwriting was as steady as it had been when she taught cursive to 3rd graders. That evening, the doorbell rang. When she opened it, Maya stood there in a lavender hoodie, backpack slung over. "Hey, Grandma." Dorothy's smile was warm, but her stomach clenched. "I brought your spice cake back," Maya said, handing over a glass dish wrapped in foil. "Dad said we could pick something out this weekend. He's been in a good mood lately. Said maybe a new iPad?" Dorothy's hand stilled as she accepted the dish. "That's nice of," she managed, her voice even. "Yeah, weird, right?" Maya laughed, oblivious. "He's been kind of generous lately." Dorothy reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind Maya's ear. "You know your dad always tries his best." Maya grinned. "I know." Dorothy pulled her into a hug, pressing her face gently into her granddaughter's shoulder, and for the first time that day, her eyes stung. "Thanks for bringing the dish back," she whispered. Maya didn't notice the slight tremble in her grandmother's arms, but Dorothy did. When the door closed behind her, Dorothy returned to her notebook. She wrote slowly and deliberately. Maya mentioned gifts from iPad pen. She put a dot beside it but didn't check the box. Not yet. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Short, direct, need to private. AP. Dorothy stared at it for a long time before lifting her. She circled the initial. The knock came at 9:47 a.m., too early for anything casual. Dorothy had just poured her coffee and opened the curtains when she saw Kyle's truck pull into the visitor spot below. She didn't have time to hide the notebook, just closed it calmly, slid it beneath the placemat, and answered the door with her usual unbothered smile. "Morning, Mom," Kyle said, walking in without waiting. "Nice place. Smells like cinnamon again." Lena followed behind him, wearing oversized sunglasses despite the cloudy morning, and a sharp beige trench coat that looked out of place in their modest building. She didn't speak, just leaned against the wall like she was waiting for someone to say something she could roll her eyes at. Dorothy gestured toward the kitchen. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." Kyle didn't bite. His charm was thin today, polished, but impatient. "Actually, I just need a quick favor." Dorothy raised an eyebrow. "All right." He sat at the dining table and pulled his phone from his pocket. I've been trying to get this rent thing squared away with the bank. They've got that two-step verification, and for some reason, I'm locked out of my end. Dorothy stood still. I need your PIN. Just for a sec. There it was. The smile in his voice was gone now, replaced by the tone he used when he thought she wasn't keeping up. Half command, half pity. Dorothy furrowed her brow. PIN? For your debit, he said, like she was a child. The one tied to the checking account. I just need to verify it. We'll get it cleared up. Lena finally looked up from her phone. It's easier if she just gives it to you, she said flatly, not even making eye contact. Dorothy blinked once, twice, then reached for a chair to sit down slowly, her posture careful. Oh, honey, she said, her voice feather-light. I don't remember setting a PIN. Do you think the bank just gave me one? Kyle smiled tightly. Come on, Mom. Dorothy tilted her head. Is it the same as the microwave one? I always get those mixed up. Lena smirked now, arms crossed. Kyle chuckled without humor. No, Mom. The bank one. For money. Remember? Dorothy pressed a hand to her temple. Well, that's just it. I don't remember. Not these days. She let the silence stretch, let the doubt sit in the room like stale perfume. Kyle exchanged a quick look with Lena. She shrugged. He stood up abruptly. All right. It's fine. We'll figure something else out. No trouble, Dorothy said sweetly. Always happy to help, if I can remember how. He kissed the top of her head out of reflex, the way he used to when he needed something. I'll call you later. As the door clicked shut behind them, Dorothy stood perfectly still. Then, without haste, she walked to the drawer beneath the china cabinet, pulled out her checkbook, and placed it inside with precision. She turned the small brass key in the lock and pocketed it. Her fingers trembled now, not with fear, but anger, controlled, focused. She retrieved the notebook, flipped to the current page, and wrote, Septi 10. Kyle asked directly for debit PIN. Lena present. Pressure applied. Response. Feigned confusion. No confirmation given. Then, below that, she added, locked checkbook, locked access, locked trust. She paused. The air in the condo was dead quiet, save for the distant hum of the building's HVAC. Dorothy walked to the kitchen phone. She still had the sticky note with the number from the text message beside the receiver. Initial review shows approximately $36,000 withdrawn over the past 10 months. Some were small, scattered amounts. Others were bulk transfers. Almost all trace back to your son. Dorothy's eyes didn't blink, but her throat felt dry. Allison continued, flipping pages audibly on her end. Multiple electronics purchases traced to a Best Buy card in Lena's name, paid for with your routing number. Spa visits, flights, Amazon orders sent to their house. Dorothy closed her eyes. You have all of it? All of it. Allison, down to the timestamps and shipping address. And Lena? Dorothy asked. She's not just benefiting, she's participating. At this point, the case isn't just strong, it's indictable. Dorothy nodded slowly and reached for her pen. She flipped open to the audit tab and wrote in crisp, dark ink, Sept 16, audit, $36,014.52. Misappropriated Lena named in 11 purchases. Kyle primary access point. Case strength, high. Allison confirms. She underlined high twice. Allison cleared her throat softly on the other end of the line. I know this is a lot. Dorothy gave a dry little laugh. It's arithmetic, just finally being shown the right columns. That afternoon, Dorothy was folding towels when the knock came. Not Kyle, not Lena, just a single, tentative knock. She opened the door to find Maya on the other side, hair pulled back into a frizzy bun, a hoodie slung low over her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept. Hi, Maya said, voice almost too quiet. Dorothy stepped aside. Come in. Maya walked in without a smile, holding a tote bag close to her chest like she didn't quite know where to put it. He's saying all kinds of stuff, Maya said, perching on the edge of the... He said you made him look like a thief, that you embarrassed him on purpose. Dorothy sat across from her, hands folded. I told him he should have just explained what was going on, but he yelled. Like, really yelled. Mom didn't even say anything. She just sat there like she wasn't hearing it. Dorothy leaned forward gently. Sweetheart, none of this is your fault. Maya's eyes welled. He said you're trying to take everything away from us, that you're turning people against him. Dorothy reached out and took her granddaughter's. Her fingers were cool, trembling slightly. I don't blame you, she said softly. Not for any of it. Not for standing by him. Not for being caught in the... I don't know what to do, Maya whispered. Dorothy squeezed her. You don't have to do anything. Just know that the truth The truth always outlasts. Maya nodded slowly. He's not the same when he's angry. No, Dorothy said. But I am. After Maya left, Dorothy returned to the binder. Her pen moved slower now, but still precise. Maya visited, conflicted, upset. Kyle attempting manipulation. Response: support only. No disclosure of audit details. She tucked the notebook into the sleeve inside the binder. The tabs had started to fray at the corners, worn from daily use. She flipped to the front, where she'd scrawled, "For Court," in bold marker. Beneath it, she now added, in smaller writing, "and for her." As she clicked the binder closed, the building's intercom buzzed. She walked to the receiver. "Yes? This is Officer Carter. May I come up?" Dorothy's heartbeat slowed, then steadied. "Of course," she said. The moment she opened the door for Officer Carter, Dorothy felt it. Something had shifted. He wasn't wearing his usual calm expression. His brows were tight, jaw set. "There's been some escalation," he said as he stepped in. "We got a tip from your bank. Kyle tried accessing your accounts again, this time over the phone, pretending to be you. Used your social, your address, even mimicked your voice." Dorothy didn't flinch. "Did it go through?" "No," Carter said. "Flagged and shut down. But it's clear he's getting more desperate. We've expanded the case. Not just identity fraud, attempted impersonation too. Everything's going in." Dorothy nodded slowly. "Then I'll update my notes." She turned toward her table where the red binder waited, open to the audit tab. Carter glanced around the small condo, noting the organized folders, the meticulous notes, the legal printouts stacked in color-coded files. "You've got more discipline than some precincts I've worked in." Dorothy gave a thin smile. "I was a teacher for nearly 4 decades. Order is survival." Carter's phone buzzed. He glanced down. "I'll be in touch soon, but keep the door locked. And if he shows up again, call me directly." "He won't come here," she said, more to herself than to him. "Not after court." She was wrong. It happened just after dinner. Dorothy had finished rinsing the last dish and was writing in the notebook when a sharp, furious knock rattled the door. 3 rapid pounds, full of purpose. "Open it!" Kyle's voice exploded from the hallway. "I know you're in there." Dorothy stayed still for half a second, her pencil hovering above the page. Then she rose and walked to the door. Not afraid, not trembling, just tired of shadows. When she opened it, Kyle shoved past her before she could say a word. "You absolute piece of work," he snapped, his voice loud, shaking. "You went into court and lied. Lied, Mom. You dragged me through mud and then sat there like some saint." Dorothy closed the door behind him. "You should lower your voice. You froze the accounts," he spat. "Do you know what kind of position you've put us in? Lena can't even pay her car lease. I've got overdraft fees from your mess." "My mess?" Dorothy's voice cut like glass. "I believe the audit calls it 36E14E and Tier 52s of unauthorized withdrawals. Is that the part you're confused about?" He was breathing hard now, face red, hands balled into fists. Next door, Frank Lewis paused his old Sinatra record and pressed a slim audio recorder against the shared wall, barely blinking as he listened. Kyle stepped in closer, close enough for Dorothy to smell the mix of aftershave and rage. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. "You think this is going to make you look like a victim. You're going to look senile, bitter, alone." Dorothy didn't back up. "Be careful, Kyle. Every word you say now is evident." A pause. Then his mouth twisted into a sneer. "You think you can hide behind cops and paperwork, but they'll see. They always do. People like you don't win." Dorothy tilted her head. "People like me?" Kyle gave a low, humorless laugh and turned toward. The front door burst open before he could touch the knob. "Maya?" Dorothy's voice cracked slightly. Maya froze in the doorway. Her eyes darted between them, Kyle's clenched jaw, Dorothy's stillness, the red in the air. "I heard you yelling," Maya whispered. From the stairwell, Kyle stepped back, the color draining slightly from his face. "Go wait in the car, Maya. I'm handling." Maya didn't. "You told me Grandma was lying." Kyle's voice was quieter now. "She is. She's confused." "She doesn't look confused," Maya said flatly. "You do." Dorothy stepped between them. "Go home, sweetheart." Maya's eyes lingered on her father one more moment, then she turned and walked out. Kyle didn't follow. He stood there, chest heaving, eyes glassy with something that looked a lot like fear trying to wear anger's face. "I'm filing a restraining order," Dorothy said calmly. "Tomorrow. This was your last visit." Kyle turned, yanked the door open, and slammed it behind him so hard the windows buzzed. Dorothy waited a moment, then walked to the cabinet, removed her notebook, and began writing under threats. Sept 17. Kyle entered without permission. Verbal aggression, recorded by neighbor. Maya witnessed, confirmed intent. As she underlined the final sentence, her phone buzzed. It was Allison. Filed emergency. Hearing set for Monday. You're not alone. Dorothy closed the notebook, but this time she didn't put it away. She left it open, spine wide, like a shield laid on the table. The rumors arrived before the Sunday bulletin. Dorothy could feel them in the air, the pauses in conversation when she entered the lobby at St. Thomas, the forced smiles from women who used to hug her after service, the careful, patronizing tone in the pastor's voice when he asked if she needed help finding her pew. She sat through the sermon in silence, her spine straight, hands folded neatly on her lap. Behind her, Lena's voice carried just enough to be overheard. I just feel terrible, she whispered to another woman. She's always been so independent, but lately, it's like she's not herself. We're worried sick. Another whisper, lower. Maya says she forgets whole conversation, just trails off mid-sentence. Kyle had to step in. You know, financially. Dorothy didn't turn around. But Frank, 3 pews up did. Just slightly. Enough to meet her eyes. She gave a small nod. By Tuesday, it reached Maya's. The principal called that morning, her voice soft, careful, too measured. Mrs. Harris, I'm only reaching out because I've known Maya since freshman year, and this concerns me. She mentioned you were having memory problems. She said her father told her you're under a court investigation for mental decline. Dorothy closed her eyes for a long breath before answering. There is no such investigation, but there is a campaign to discredit me. I see. The principal hesitated. Would you be open to coming in for a conversation? Yes, Dorothy said, and I'll bring my attorney. Later that afternoon, Dorothy stood in the hallway of her building while Frank adjusted the batteries on his hearing aid. I heard it, he said simply. Every lie Lena poured into Marla Fitzpatrick's ear over coffee. About you being paranoid. About you not recognizing Maya once. They're sowing weeds. Fast. They're not lies, Dorothy said, voice flat. They're cover. Frank leaned against the wall. You planning on pulling the weeds? No, Dorothy said, staring down the hallway like it was a battlefield. I'm burning the whole garden. Back in her condo, she opened the binder to a fresh tab. Press. By the end of the day, it held the following: transaction records, ATM stills, the audit summary, screenshots of Kyle's texts, the voicemail from Principal Barnes, a sworn affidavit from Frank confirming the September 17th confrontation. Allison sat across the table, reading through it with surgical precision. We'll redact the sensitive info and release only what's legally permitted, she said. Enough to tell your side, on your terms. And when it gets ugly? It already is ugly, Allison replied. You're just turning the lights on. Dorothy looked out the window. The sky over Minneapolis was bruised purple with dusk, the edges lined in orange. Let them talk, she said finally. Let them whisper. She reached for her pen and added one last line to the bottom of the press tab. If they want whispers? She looked back at Allison, her voice barely more than breath. I'll give them headlines. 2 hours later, a reporter from the Star Tribune texted Alice, heard you're representing a fraud victim, the story that sounds like fiction. You available for comment? Allison smiled and passed the phone across the table. Dorothy stared at the screen, then up at her attorney. This doesn't make me a hero, she said. No, Allison replied. It makes you a witness with receipts. Dorothy thought of Maya, of the pastor's squinting pity, of Lena's false She clicked the binder shut. Across town, Kyle scrolled through his Facebook feed. Mid-scroll, his eyes caught a breaking local piece. Minneapolis woman takes on family fraud and fights back retired teacher document. 36-day scheme by son and daughter. The image was grainy, but it was unmistakable. His mother, standing on the courthouse steps, red binder. The article ran above the fold. Front page, Sunday Star Tribune. Betrayed by blood. Retired Minneapolis teacher exposes 36K fraud by her own son. By Allison Rowe. Staff writer Dorothy read it twice, seated at the same kitchen table where this all began. Her coffee had gone cold. The headline didn't make her proud, just quiet. Her photo, binder in hand, eyes steady, looked older than she felt. She folded the paper and set it next to the red binder. Then she flipped to the press tab and slid the article in. By mid-morning, the doorbell rang. When she opened it, there stood Mr. Thorson from Unit 2, former Navy, hardly spoke. He held out a plastic container of banana bread like it weighed 100 pounds. I always knew Kyle was a slick one, he muttered. But this This was beyond. Dorothy blinked. Thank you, Paul. He nodded, shuffled off. At noon, 2 women from her knitting group stopped by. No banana bread, just hugs. You were right, Dot. I should have seen it. Dorothy just smiled and held the door open. By 3 p.m., Frank came by with more pages printed from online coverage. You've got people talking, he said, handing her a folder. And for once, not behind your back. Dorothy flipped through the pages. Reader comments, Twitter threads, neighborhood forum posts. Most were supportive. A few weren't. She expected that. They can talk all they want, she said. But now they know. Frank gave a proud little nod. You didn't just burn the garden, Doc. You planted a flag. Across town, Maya Harris stood alone in the girls' bathroom, staring at her phone. 3 girls had laughed behind her in the hallway. Not loud, but loud enough. One of them whispered, "Fraud family." Another asked, "Did your grandma call the cops on your dad again?" She didn't cry. Instead, she texted her mother, "Please don't make me defend him. Not anymore." Then she walked into the guidance office and asked to speak to someone. That evening, she showed up at Dorothy's condo unannounced, hoodie zipped high, her eyes puffy from hours of holding everything in. "I'm okay," Maya said quickly, sitting on the just needed to get out of the house. Dorothy handed her a mug of hot cocoa. "Did something happen?" Maya shrugged. "People are saying things at school about Dad, about me. They're not wrong, just mean." Dorothy sat beside her. "I'm sorry." Maya shook her head. "No, I'm glad it's out there. All of it. You didn't ruin anything, Grandma. You told the truth. And I'm not ashamed of you." Dorothy reached for her hand, gently. "Truth hurts only liars, sweetheart. Anyone else? It sets free." Maya wiped her cheek, barely nodding. The next morning, Allison, "I've filed the civil suit," she said. "Restitution, interest, and damages. We're not just playing defense now." Dorothy looked out the window. "Good. The DA's office is reviewing the criminal portion. Judge Nolan wants a pretrial hearing next month. But she already ordered Kyle to appear in person." Dorothy didn't ask what would happen if he refused. She knew. "All right," she said. "Let's give them a calendar date to fear." Kyle Harris stood in the garage, pacing like a man inside a cage he didn't know he'd built. His phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. Another reporter. His Facebook was flooded with comments, half of them from people he barely remembered. "Exploiter. Shame on you. Stealing from your mother? Disgusting." Lena sat in the car, door open, scrolling through the article on her phone. She didn't say a word, just shook her head once. Kyle slammed his palm against the wall. "She's spinning it, making herself the victim." "She is the victim," Lena said flatly, still scrolling. Kyle stared at her like she'd cracked. "She's ruining us," he muttered. "We have to shut her down." Lena looked up, expression hollow. "Then maybe you shouldn't have given her the story." Dorothy slid the civil court notice into the court orders tab of her binder. The binder was nearly full now, its spine worn, its corners curled, but still solid, still holding. She turned to a blank page, wrote, "Sept 20, civil suit filed, trial date pending, public pressure rising, Maya holding steady, Kyle cornered." She paused, then added, "Storm's coming." Just then, a new email appeared on her screen. Subject, Victim Impact Statement Request, DA's Office Body. "We're preparing our file for formal would you be willing to speak at sentencing, should the case proceed to conviction?" Dorothy stared at the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. She clicked reply. The indictment came on a Thursday, a plain manila envelope, hand-delivered by a county courier. Stamped across the top, in bold black type, State of Minnesota v. Kyle James Harris. Dorothy opened it at the kitchen table without ceremony. The binder sat beside her, already turned to a fresh tab. Criminal case. Inside the envelope were 4 pages. Count I. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Count 2. Identity theft. Use without consent. Count 3. Wire fraud. Over $10,000. Count 4. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Under co-conspirator, Lena Harris's name appeared in small, stark type. Dorothy's lips didn't move, but her eyes narrowed slightly. She clipped the documents into the binder and wrote, slowly, Sept 26, formal indictment, 4 counts, Lena named. Then, court date, Oct 17. That afternoon, Allison called. "We've been waiting for this," she said. "It means the DA believes he's not just guilty, he's prosecutable. The evidence is airtight." "Ironclad," Dorothy echoed. "Ironclad." Allison, "We'll prepare Maya's deposition this. She's a key witness." Dorothy was silent. "She's just 18. She's also brave," Allison said. "And truth doesn't ask permission from fear." 2 days later, Maya sat in the county law office with her hands folded tightly in her lap. The room was windowless, the fluorescent lighting harsh, but her voice stayed steady as she answered every question from the assistant district attorney. Yes, she'd overheard her father yelling at Dorothy. Yes, she'd seen financial gifts increase suddenly. Yes, Lena had told her not to ask questions. Yes, she believed her grandmother was telling the truth. At the end, when asked why she chose to, Maya didn't look at she looked at Dorothy, seated quietly in the corner, eyes soft but unblinking. Because she protected me, no one else did. Outside the building, as they walked toward the parking lot, Frank was waiting by the curb in his old denim jacket. He handed Dorothy a paper coffee cup without a word, then looked at Maya. You did good, kid. Maya gave a sheepish smile. Thanks. Frank turned to Dorothy. They underestimate. Dorothy took a sip. So did he. Frank grinned. Yeah, but he's got a judge now. Meanwhile, across town, Kyle stood in his driveway flanked by 2 attorneys, one civil, one criminal. I don't understand how they're building this case, he growled, pacing. It's a misunderstanding. Families share accounts. Gifts aren't crimes. His criminal attorney didn't blink. They have surveillance, voice recordings, IP addresses, a cooperating granddaughter, and now your wife's name is in it too. Kyle turned sharply. You said they wouldn't charge her. I said they might not. The DA changed their mind. Lena stepped out from the front porch, arms crossed. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. They said I could take a deal, she said. Kyle froze. What kind of deal? Testify, cooperate, probation instead of prison. You'd turn on me? I didn't steal from your mother, she snapped. I just used what you gave me. Kyle stared at her like a man finally seeing the fire behind. Let me guess, Lena added. You're going to say that's my fault too. Back in her condo, Dorothy pressed record on her phone and dictated the latest update into her audio log. Case moving forward. Maya strong, Lena folding, Kyle spinning. She saved the file, then slid it into a USB drive labeled trial prep. As she closed her laptop, the landline rang. It was Allison. We have confirmation, she said. The trial is set for October 17th. Judge Nolan is presiding. Dorothy looked out the window. Rain tapped lightly against the glass. Then it's time, she said. To what? Dorothy's voice was calm. To turn the page. But across the city, inside a downtown parking garage, a different page was being written. Kyle stepped out of his car and handed his phone to someone in a gray hoodie. She's going to say things in court that'll wreck everything. I need it stopped before then. The man nodded once. And you're sure she'll be alone tomorrow morning? Kyle looked down at the text on his phone. Allison's email confirming the next deposition. Yeah, he muttered. She'll be alone. Dorothy Harris never answered knocks and she listened to them first. So when she heard the sharp double rap on her door at 6:42 a.m., too early for a neighbor, too urgent for a package, she didn't move. She tapped her phone awake, slid open the security app, and watched. The hallway camera caught him clearly. Kyle, hood up, pacing, mouth moving even though no one was there to hear him. Dorothy tapped, record. The second knock was louder. You think I'm scared of judges now? Kyle hissed at the door. You think your little show changes anything? He leaned close to the peephole, unaware the camera caught every inch of his face. You open this door or I swear, Mom, I'll make sure Maya regrets every second she spends with you. Dorothy didn't open the door. She opened the app's mic instead. You've been recorded, Kyle, she said, her voice firm through the speaker. Walk away. Kyle froze. She watched him blink into the lens, realization dawning. Then he turned and ran. By 9:10 a.m., Officer Carter sat at her dining table reviewing the footage on Dorothy's phone. Clear enough for prosecution, he said, brow tight. This wasn't just intimidation. He threatened your granddaughter. That takes it to another level. Dorothy slid her notebook across the table, open to a page marked, Sept 27, 6:42 a.m. Recorded threat. Kyle. Direct reference to Maya. Carter tapped the line. I'll attach this to the ongoing report and notify the DA. It'll show intent and escalation. Dorothy nodded. Good. And don't worry, he added. We're watching now closely. Later that afternoon, Dorothy walked into the living room to find Maya sitting cross-legged on the floor, sorting through a stack of old photo albums. She looked up with a faint smile. I told Mom I was staying with you, at least until the trial's over. Dorothy paused. How'd that go? Maya shrugged. She cried. Then she yelled. Then she said I was choosing sides. And are you? Maya held up an old picture, herself at 6, sitting on Dorothy's lap, both of them grinning at a Christmas. I'm choosing truth. Dorothy sat beside her, touched the corner of the photo. Truth doesn't require sides, she said softly. It stands on its own. Across town, Lena stood in the kitchen with her phone pressed against her ear, voice tight. She took her. She hissed. Maya's staying with her. She's testifying again. I told you this would happen. Kyle's voice crackled back through the line. Let her go. We'll fix it at trial. You still think there's going to be a trial where we win? Lena barked. Wake up, Kyle. She's not bluffing, and neither is Maya. Kyle's silence on the other end said more than any words could. Lena stared at her reflection in the microwave door, pale, hollow-eyed, cornered. That evening, Dorothy placed a fresh page into the binder under the criminal case. She wrote in her small, precise cursive, Maya staying with me. Voluntary. Threatened by Kyle at 6:42 a.m. Evidence recorded. Carter confirms felony level intimidation. Lena, unstable. Then, almost as an afterthought, house quiet. Maya asleep, calm before trial. She paused, then added, calm before something. As she stood to close the binder, the lights in the kitchen flickered. Just once. A power hiccup. Nothing more. But Dorothy walked to the front door anyway, slid the deadbolt into place, and latched the chain. She pulled the curtains tighter, then turned on her phone's voice recorder and laid it face up on the nightstand. Old habits, old instinct. She wasn't afraid. But she wasn't naive either. At 1:16 a.m., her phone buzzed beside her bed. A new voicemail, blocked number, no message, just breathe. The courtroom was silent, so silent you could hear the bailiff's pen tapping against his. Dorothy sat in the first row behind the prosecution, spine straight, hands folded. Maya was beside her, shoulders squared. Allison stood to her left, flipping through the binder Dorothy had filled with care and fury. It sat on the table, a silent witness of its own. The jury filed in, 12 ordinary Minnesotans now entrusted with the full weight of Dorothy's war. Then Judge Nolan entered, robe flowing like a storm cloud. The room stood. Then it began. The assistant district attorney, a clean-cut man named Farrell, approached the jury box. This case, he began, isn't about a misunderstanding. It's about betrayal. He let the word hang. It's about a son, Kyle James Harris, who used his mother's trust as a tool, who stole, deceived, and threatened, not once, not twice, but over a sustained period of nearly a year. With help. He turned toward Dorothy. She didn't flinch. This is not a story of family drama. It is a criminal case. And today, you will see proof of that. Beyond any reasonable doubt. Officer Tim Carter was the first witness. He walked the jury through the ATM surveillance footage, the timestamps, the login log, the impersonation call. Farrell played the recording of Kyle's voice. This is Dorothy Harris. I'd like to authorize a wire transfer. Gasps rippled from the jury box. Someone on the back row shook their head. Carter didn't embellish, just facts, measured and damning. Next came Allison. She stood, calm as ever, and unzipped the red binder before the jury. This, she said, is the documented timeline of exploitation. Each page, dated, each entry, corroborated. The defendant's name appears in bank logs, delivery confirmations, and even a failed wire transfer flagged for fraud. She handed copies to the clerk. The jurors flipped through printed evidence as Allison. We are not speculating. We are demonstrating, line by line, how a woman's dignity was targeted for convenience and how she fought back with nothing but her record, her voice, and her resolve. Dorothy lowered her gaze, swallowing hard. Frank Lewis walked slowly to the witness stand, dressed in his best flannel shirt and Sunday blazer. I used to carry the mail, he said, voice gravelly but clear. You learn to notice things, patterns, quiet change. He told them about the letter, the whispered warning, the yelling through thin walls, and finally, the night he pressed a recorder to the plaster and heard Kyle's threat firsthand. She didn't want revenge, he said. She wanted safety and justice. Then Maya, she was sworn in with hands that trembled slightly, but her voice never did. She recounted the gifts, the confusion, her father's sudden generosity, then the anger. He told me Grandma was losing it, that she was confused. But she wasn't, Maya said, chin high. She saw what was happening, and she protected herself. Farrell stepped closer. And who protected you, Maya? Maya turned to the gallery. Her eyes met Dorothy's. She did. Dorothy felt something move in her chest then. Not pride, not sorrow, resolve. Farrell closed the prosecution's case with clarity and elder fraud is often invisible until it's too late. But not this time. This time, the victim documented every step. This time, the family didn't collapse. It told the truth. Kyle didn't take the stand. His attorney didn't want the jury to hear his. Dorothy sat silently through the defense's brief rebuttals, the excuses about misunderstanding, the tired plea about familial confusion. She never looked at Kyle, but he looked at her. Often. When the defense rested, the courtroom exhaled. Judge Nolan dismissed the jury for deliberation. We will reconvene when a verdict is reached. Dorothy stood slowly, smoothing the front of her blouse. Outside the courtroom, Allison leaned in. They heard it all. Every piece of it. We did our job. Dorothy nodded. Now we wait. Frank approached quietly. How you holding up? Dorothy looked down the long hallway. It felt like the edge of something. I feel steady, she said. Then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He won't go down quiet. Watch your back tonight. The jury returned in less than 4 hours. Dorothy had spent the wait in the courthouse atrium, fingers curled around a paper cup she never drank. Maya sat beside her, knees pulled to her chest, hoodie sleeves covering her. At 3:37 p.m., the bailiff They're ready. Dorothy didn't speak, just rose, slowly, steadily, binder in hand. Inside the courtroom, the energy shifted. The jury was back. Expressions unreadable. Kyle sat between his attorneys, his jaw clenched, a bead of sweat sliding down his temple. Lena was behind him, one row back, a crumpled tissue clenched in both fists. Judge Nolan returned to the bench. Madam Foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict? A woman in her 50s stood, paper in hand. We have your own. Please read it. The room held its breath. On count Y, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. We find the defendant, Kyle James Harris, guilty. On count 2, identity theft, used without consent, guilty. On count 3, wire fraud over $10,000, guilty. On count 4, conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. A gasp escaped from someone in the gallery. Dorothy didn't turn. She didn't exhale. Not yet. Judge Nolan continued, voice steady as granite. This court recognizes the defendant's ongoing pattern of manipulation, coercion, and financial abuse. We acknowledge the bravery of the victim compiling evidence and exposing what would have otherwise remained hidden. She turned to Lena. Mrs. Lena Harris, you have been named as a willing participant in this fraud. However, due to your cooperation with the DA's office, the court is prepared to accept a plea agreement. You will serve 5 years probation, perform 200 hours of community service, and pay joint restitution. Lena nodded once, face white. The judge faced Kyle next. Mr. Harris, you are hereby ordered to pay full restitution in the amount of $36,014.52. You are stripped of any legal claim to the estate or future inheritance of Dorothy Harris. You will serve a term to be determined at sentencing, pending pre-sentencing reports. Kyle stared at her, dumbfounded. I suggest you use your remaining time out of custody wisely, Judge Nolan added. Your next court appearance will not be civil. Gavel. One hard crack. Court adjourned. Outside the courtroom, the light looked different, sharper. Dorothy stood still in the hallway, eyes fixed on the tiled floor. Only when Maya threw her arms around did she let her shoulders sink. Just an inch. You did it, Grandma, Maya whispered into her neck. It's over. Dorothy pressed her cheek against Maya's head. We did it. Behind them, Lena passed without speaking. She didn't look at either of them. Just walked fast, head down, toward the elevator. Kyle followed moments later, flanked by his lawyers. His eyes caught Dorothy, and for a fleeting second, something flickered there. Not rage, not even shame, defeat. Dorothy didn't flinch. As Kyle disappeared around the corner, Frank stepped beside her, holding his usual black thermos like a totem. They always thought you'd fold, he said softly, but the letter saved you. Dorothy turned to him, voice low and even, and the law sealed it. Allison approached, binder now tucked under her arm, her face softer. This'll go to sentencing next month, she said. But the hardest part? You already did that. Dorothy nodded. Let me know when they want my victim impact. I will. Allison hesitated. You want to ride home? I'd rather walk, Dorothy said. For once, I want to feel the ground under my feet. That evening, back at her condo, she opened the binder one final time. Inside the court orders, she slid the final copy of the verdict. Sept 30. Guilty on all counts. Restitution ordered. Inheritance revoked. Maya safe. Lena on probation. She added one more sentence at the bottom. Justice written in, not blood. As she closed the binder, her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. You think this ends in court. It doesn't. Dorothy read the words, then tapped delete. She stood, walked to the fireplace and placed the binder gently inside a fireproof lockbox. Then she opened the drawer beside the bed. Inside, a new notebook, blank. She took out a pen, wrote on the first page, Veilbanner 2. Then, they thought the storm was over. She underlined twice. The lockbox sat on the top shelf of the hall closet, nestled between spare linens and a winter coat Dorothy hadn't worn in 2 years. Inside, the red binder, closed, filed, safe. Dorothy stood with her hand resting lightly on the closet door for a moment longer than just feeling the weight of done. Not victory, not revenge, just done. Maya's voice called from the bedroom. Grandma, do we have any more of those cinnamon teas? Check the tin near the toaster. Dorothy answered. She heard the cabinet open, the soft rattle of tea bag, footsteps across the tile, a familiar rhythm now. Maya had moved in 2 days after the verdict, just until things cooled down, she'd said. But Dorothy didn't ask for a timeline. She simply cleared a drawer and bought an extra. Frank knocked just after 2 coffees in hand, as usual. Black and stronger than it should be, he said, handing her a cup. House blend was out, so I gambled. Dorothy took a sip. You gamble better than most attorneys I know. Frank stepped inside, gaze landing briefly on Maya's sneakers by the door, then on the bookshelf. Neat, orderly, the red binder noticeably absent. Feels different in here, he said. Dorothy tilted her. It is. Frank gave a soft grunt of approval and settled into the armchair. I figure this place is safer than Congress right now. That drew a smile. 10 minutes later, Allison arrived. No laptop, no leather portfolio, just a thin envelope marked final. It's done, she said, placing it on the table. Restitution confirmed. Court records sealed for Maya's protection. Kyle's sentencing scheduled for next week. But as far as you're concerned, she tapped the envelope. Case closed. Dorothy slid the envelope into the side drawer of the roll-top desk. Not the binder, not this time. Thank you, she said. Allison offered a rare, unguarded smile. It was a privilege. Not many people would have fought that hard, not for themselves. Dorothy glanced toward the hallway where Maya's laughter echoed from a video on her phone. She wasn't the only one I was fighting for. After Allison left, Dorothy spent the afternoon folding laundry while Maya filled out a college application online. The condo was warm, full of small domestic sound, the clink of spoons, the hum of the dishwasher, the wind brushing the windows like fingertips. No threats, no door slam, no late-night voicemail, just peace. Around sunset, Maya brought her mug to the. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't kept those notes? Dorothy looked up from her crossword. No one would have believed me. Maya sat beside her, pulling a blanket across both their laps. Then I'm really glad you did. Dorothy didn't answer right away. She stared at the glow creeping along the floorboard, the way the light bent through the blinds like quiet applause. Then, softly, she said it. Respect. Maya glanced over. What? Dorothy smiled to her. Nothing, just a whisper, barely meant for the room. Later that night, after Maya had gone to bed, Dorothy stood at the window, watching the neighborhood exhale its day. Frank's porch light flicked off across the courtyard. A wind chime clinked softly down the block. Somewhere, someone's screen door creaked, then closed. Dorothy turned from the window, flipped off the light, and stepped into the quiet. In the silence, her phone buzzed once. Not a threat, a calendar reminder. Victim impact statement, 1 week. Dorothy tapped dismiss, then opened the drawer by her bed. The new notebook still waited, still blank. She picked it up, wrote 1 line. They took trust. I rebuilt it, then set down the pen. Not finished, not yet, but ready. The stage wasn't large, just a modest platform at the Minneapolis Convention Center, set between 2 beige curtains and a projection screen that read, Midwest Elder Rights Coalition, Fall Conference, Financial Safety, Personal Power. But to Dorothy, it might as well have been the Supreme Court. She stood behind the podium, the microphone already adjusted, a soft amber spotlight warming her face. The room was full. Community leaders, social workers, attorneys, seniors, survivors. She took a breath. Not deep, not dramatic, just enough. Then she spoke. My name is Dorothy Harris. I'm a retired teacher, a grandmother, a woman who keeps her passwords in a fireproof safe and her memories on paper, not in the cloud. A soft laugh rippled through the crowd. And last year, I became a target. The room stilled again. She spoke clearly, without theatric. No notes, just the rhythm of lived experience. My son, someone I loved, someone I raised, exploited my trust. He accessed my accounts, lied to my face, used my name to enrich himself and called it helping. His wife supported it. My granddaughter got caught in the middle, and for a while, I believed it was just a bad pat, a misunderstanding. Her voice didn't shake, but the withdrawals kept happening, and the lies got bolder. Until one morning, I opened my mailbox and found a note from a neighbor, a warning. That's when I started writing things down. She held up a small red binder. The audience leaned in. This is what protected me. Not the binder, but the decision to document, to pay attention, to believe my instinct. She paused, letting the weight of it settle. Protecting yourself isn't paranoia, it's wisdom. A few people nodded. Someone near the back wiped their eyes. Dorothy continued. I had to take my own son to court. I had to listen to my granddaughter. I had to hear my name slandered in church pews and whispered through closed doors. And I had to sit in a courtroom while 12 strangers decided if I was worth believing. A beat of silence. They believed me. Applause broke out, soft at first, then swelling. Dorothy didn't bow her head. She stood in it, received it. When the room quieted again, she offered a small smile. I'm not sharing this because I want your pity. I'm sharing it because if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. And if I could stop it, so can you. She looked down at the front row, at Maya, sitting upright, eyes shining. She looked one row behind her, where Frank sat holding a styrofoam, his lips tugged into the smallest, proudest grin. And then she gave the final line, plain, unflinching. And when I discovered who was using my bank account, it wasn't just fraud. A pause. She let the moment. It was freedom. The applause was instant and whole. No hesitation, just the sound of people standing, clapping, some wiping their cheeks, others leaning forward like they didn't want her to leave the stage. Dorothy gave a single nod of thanks, then stepped away from the podium. Frank was the first to greet her backstage. From neighbor's note to microphone, he said, tapping her binder lightly. That's one hell of a journey. Dorothy smiled. Let's just hope nobody gets any ideas about turning it into a movie. Too late, Maya said, slipping her arm through Dorothy. You've already got fans. Dorothy laughed, not polite, not soft. A full laugh, unburdened. As they stepped out into the hallway, light streaming through the windows, people parting like water around them, Dorothy didn't feel watched. She felt seen. She walked steady. She walked free. And behind her, tucked back into her bag, was a new notebook. Page 1 still open, still waiting.